Good afternoon. Hi, everyone. How's it going? Are we feeling good? Has it been a good time? Yeah? Oh, you guys came up with me. All right. Well, I am excited to be here today. Again, my name is Christy George. I'm the president and CEO of Intersect, Illinois. Intersect, Illinois is the state's public-private economic development partner. We focus on business attraction, business recruitment, and telling the Why Illinois story all over the world. And really, that's why Illinois is the best place to live, work, and do business. And here I have with me an esteemed panel, that all of which are amazing folks. And maybe I'll kick it over to you, Tony, to introduce yourself.
Thank you. Can you hear me? No? Hear me now?
Try that one.
Hello? Hello, there we go. Thank you. Tony Reinhart with Ford Motor Company. We make cars and trucks and things. So the good news is we've been doing that for about 122 years, but more importantly for now over 100 years on the south side of Chicago, where we're in our 101st year, and we make Explorers and Aviators and police interceptors, which I was telling some of them, the panelists backstage a little bit while ago, is very interesting for us in the conversation about tariffs, because we make the police interceptors here for everywhere around the world. So whatever happens in this space will be of interest to us. But glad to be here and appreciate the time.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tony. And Mark, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, all. Thanks for being here. Mark Sami. I'm a partner at West Monroe focused on technology implementations and manufacturers, so helping existing and new manufacturers really scale their businesses and grow through the implementation of technology.
Thanks so much for being here. Appreciate you. And Charlie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Is this one on? There we go. I'm Charlie Zuhoski. I run Atlantic Analysis and Engineering, and we provide support to science and technology program managers in the federal government at agencies like DARPA and the Office of Naval Research. Prior to starting that firm, I worked for Ball Aerospace and ran their conformal antenna manufacturing, and I also stood up their first CI/CD pipeline for DevSecOps. So I'm here. I'm very excited.
Thank you so much, Charlie. And lastly, rounding out our panel is Jacob from NuCurrent. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello.
Nope. Turn it up.
There we go. Hello, everybody. I'm Jacob Babcock. I'm a board member here at mHUB, and I'm also the CEO and founder of NuCurrent. We're a wireless power technology company. I'm not exactly sure how I got invited to this panel about manufacturing, because my business model is explicitly not to manufacture anything. We're a licensing company and a design company. But what that means is all of our customers do build things around the world. So I have exposure to a lot of different methods of manufacturing, different supply chains, different decision-making processes across companies like HP, Honeywell, Logitech, and other major manufacturers.
Okay, so you do know why you're here.
I'm going to round out the edges. I don't know how factories get set up, but I can tell you what comes out of them.
Very good, very good. Well, advanced manufacturing is a huge component of Illinois' industry. No industry in Illinois makes up more than 14% of our economy, but at the state of Illinois, we focused on, in partnership with all of our Team Illinois coalition partners, is really honing in on 6 key growth industries. We've set those out in our Open for Business plan. You can find that on both Intersect and DCEO's website, and that's the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. But we focused on advanced manufacturing as one of the key areas that we are going to really spend time in ensuring that we are building that ecosystem, we are strengthening it, and we are recruiting businesses. It's an area where Illinois simply has a right to win. Now, with that, Illinois certainly has, our Team Illinois folks certainly have our own definition of advanced manufacturing and what we have focused on and set out to focus on. But organizations may have different definitions of that. So, Tony, let me start with you. What is your definition?
I'm going to get in trouble on the first question here. Yeah, I love the conversation about advanced manufacturing. Let's be honest. What is advanced manufacturing? I don't know if there is a set definition for any one manufacturer, right? It depends on where you're at. And I say that in this way, though, right? if your processes aren't lending itself for you to become more efficient, more effective, et cetera, you're not going to be able to make it in our world unless you have a real niche product that you make, you know what I'm saying, that everybody else has to have a patent or you have a special process or whatever it might be. My point being is this, though. Everybody's advanced manufacturing, just where you're at on the spectrum. And by that, I'm saying where you're at in terms of using technology, where you're at in terms of using robotics, where you're at in using AI, where you're at in using 3D printing or whatever you might be doing, right? Because you have to figure out what's working for you, and you have to be a part of the process. So advanced manufacturing is not a destination. It's the ongoing journey. It's the ongoing process to continue to move forward, right? I always say in our business, right, there's the only constant in my business is change, right? And I think it's probably true for everybody else in the room for the most part, especially if you're a manufacturer. The process changes, and a few years ago, right, we were going to be a service economy, and we were country when country wasn't cool, right? And now we're cool, and so my point in all this, just say this: you have to be embracing the spectrum, the journey, and what you're doing, and continue. And you may be here or you may be there, but if you're not embracing those technologies, those processes, and becoming an advanced manufacturer, you're at a disadvantage because you got to look at all those things and what's going to help make your business work.
And just as a follow-up to that, what are some of the strategic advantages that Illinois has when it comes to advanced manufacturing?
Well, I think there's a number of things. In particular, it's the educational community. It's the mHUB. It's the mindset that's taking place because we need all of that experience, that advancement, that technology, those conversations around this, because sometimes we get very focused, myopic on just getting X number of vehicles out the door every day, right? Because when you're doing, 65 Explorers an hour, right, for 20 hours a day, it gets a little demanding. And so to be able to have these involvement, because look, Haven and I have known each other for a long time since it started and had a lot of conversations. To be able to bring those kind of, the mindset, the things around this together, that's important. And Illinois does a great job in that space.
Now, Mark, turning to you, what strategies do you see you and your clients as winning? What should traditional manufacturers adopt today to ensure long-term stability and growth?
Yeah, I think the big thing we're seeing right now is really building that resiliency in your supply chain. So I know that a lot of the panels have been talking about that today already, but ultimately, right now it's tariffs. A couple months ago it was dock worker strikes. Prior to that it was a ship stuck in a canal. Like, there's going to be disruptions, and I think Tony said it great. Like, you have to be able to adapt to change and change quickly. And I think that's really something that has to be embedded in an organization, which may be hard to do if you've been manufacturing for 100 years. But if you're just starting up, I think planning with that in mind as you get into it is super important, building that. And then the other thing is really technology and making sure your manufacturing is technology enabled. There's just so much available to you right now, and it's only going to get more and more available. I think democratization of technology and being accessible to a startup is only going to continue to improve, and I think making sure that you're technology enabled from the start is super important.
What are some of the ways in which you've seen Illinois kind of meet that challenge and also provide some of those strategic advantages to companies, particularly in the advanced manufacturing sector?
Yeah, I mean, we're all here because of that, right? Like, mHUB exists to make sure that manufacturing continues to stay local, so that is one way to diversify your supply chain is just to have it right next to you. But I think the big technology companies are all having massive offices here. So the investments that Chicago and the region are making in technology is huge locally. So you have that talent available to you. And I think in the first panel, someone said we're a city and region of doers. And I think that helps a ton to have that technology and that innovation local here, but building innovation into your processing, into your organizations with the resources available to you here.
Now, that makes a lot of sense. And just building on what both of you have said, and particularly on the workforce comment that you made, Tony, I know here in Illinois, we graduate at our University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign more engineers than Caltech, Stanford, and MIT combined. And so for that to have, thank you, yes, please clap for that. just recognizing this very strong workforce that we have here, what we're producing here, it's significant to keep advanced manufacturing alive and innovating all throughout this state. So, Tony, I know you've spent a lot of time on the workforce front. You've worked in close partnership with the Cook County Workforce Partnership to ensure that we've got a strong workforce at the Torrance Avenue plant. But just building off of something that Mark said on diversifying your supply chains, how has Ford kind of navigated, particularly coming out of COVID, that diversification of your supply chain and making sure that it can kind of innovate throughout that time?
Well, you know, COVID, right, for all of us was quite the experience, right? I mean, you've never seen anything like that. We were down literally only about 60 days. And we were surprised at how much demand there was. I think everybody thought, and I was talking to somebody earlier, we went together to the CHIPS signing, you know, at the White House and how the CHIPS changed, right? There's a perfect example we're talking about. There was a lot of expectation that the chips were going to change and go for laptops and cell phones and other things, and it came up for us, made the industry come up short. I don't think people really realized just how much demand there was going to be for vehicles. It was quite the experience. And the problem with like chips as an example, right? You don't really make chips, you kind of grow them. It's hard to explain because they come over time. And there was such a shortage, right? And I was there at the White House with the governor, right, when the bill was signed. And but figuring out how to navigate that is one big example was huge. And we're just now, the last couple of years, getting back to where that's at and to work with those suppliers. And then it doesn't just chips, it's all the electronics. You got to think about where our vehicles are today. You look at the vehicle compared to it was 10, 15, 20 years ago. There's more technology in that vehicle than you know, most space shuttles, right? Those vehicles are highly efficient, highly electronic, they're high tech, there's connectivity, there's autonomous technologies you're getting, all the things that go into there. But navigating that and getting the suppliers and getting them back up to speed and doing that, it takes public-private partnerships, it takes a lot of work, and we've been very fortunate to have good partners on both sides.
Well, that's excellent. Now, you mentioned something, the White House, so let's turn to a hot topic, even as of today, trade. There's been a lot of activity over the last couple of months on the trade policies, the tariffs that have come down, and even today we had an update that now there's the tariffs that were set to go into effect or did go into effect on Tuesday, particularly as it relates to Mexico and Canada, have now been paused until April 2nd. Certainly a lot of confusion, a lot of concern about them, and particularly for Illinois, Canada and Mexico were two of our top 3 trading partners, our third being China. Now, recognizing that these tariffs that were imposed at least for 2 days and have now been paused for another month would have significant impacts all throughout Illinois, every corner of our state, literally every industry of our state. What are some of the specific challenges or opportunities that the recent trade policies have presented to your organization? And Mark, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think it's like really what we were talking about on making sure that you're able to pivot and be able to adapt quickly. So for us, for what we're seeing again from clients, they're evaluating one, where they could potentially, like I think someone talked about it earlier, can they source in a different country or serve in a different country, potentially if they're trying to export for the retaliatory tariffs, or find other suppliers locally to be able to fulfill their the current demand they have. But also, I think another thing is we're finding people don't have their house in order to be able to make those decisions even. And so making sure that you have the connected systems or technology to be able to allow you to make those decisions quickly. So again, being able to adapt to change has been the biggest factor, and building that into your processes is important. That's where we're seeing a lot of change, or kind of fueling this change. But again, this is just another thing that's happening that's causing that. And so people have been preparing for this over the past 5 years, COVID kind of being the big event that jump-started it. So.
No, that makes sense. Charlie, what about you? What challenges have you been navigating in this time of uncertainty regarding our trade interactions with some of our key international partners?
So similar, what we found is the kind of lack of data and organization sometimes with the smaller manufacturers when we get outside of the traditional defense industrial base, it becomes a challenge to be able to look at that impact of those decisions quickly. And so I think that throws a little bit of the investment community, makes them caution to the wind, and the government's kind of standing by. And so that's what we've seen starting to happen. But one of the projects that we've been working on is to start to understand from the outside in, what does it look like at the tail end of the supply chain instead of at the beginning? So getting outside of Washington, D.C., all the way to the end of the supply chain, where is it coming from? And that's where we have found that we need to grow that data more, and we also need to grow some of the security in those systems so that we get some more predictability.
Jacob, what about you? Just recognizing that you're leading a very innovative power company, what challenges have you been navigating?
Yeah, I'll take it to the very front end. If you were saying the end stages, so at the front end you have the innovation side, the design side, and one of the things that it's not related to tariffs, but it is related to nationalism and policy, is around innovation policy, patent rights, patent policies, and that hasn't been talked about so much in the last 30, 60 days because other things have been out in front. But there's a lot going on right now with competitiveness in foreign countries. A lot of people don't know that China is outpacing America in filing patents in their own domestic jurisdiction. They're setting up patent courts there. Now that China's turned from being just a cheap manufacturer and cheap labor source into an innovator, they have the most innovative drone company in the world there. They want to protect their innovations now, like Americans have and like Japanese learned to in the 80s. And so I think it's just another branch of the same tree of nationalism, onshoring, and it's something that I think America still isn't as focused on. How do you spur more innovation and more investment in innovation? And one way to do that is to give more certainty into the financial investors, where if they back innovative companies, that they know that those innovative companies will be able to monetize that innovation. Right now there's too much uncertainty in the system, and that's caused a lot of weight and drag on the venture capital markets, especially for hard tech and manufacturing-oriented companies.
Very interesting. Tony, what about you? How's Ford handling these challenges?
There's an old proverb that says, "Shall you live to see interesting times?" I made it. We've made it, right? Most of us have made it. And I only say that in this regard. The trade discussion is extremely difficult. And because you got to look at it from our standpoint, we look at it on multiple levels, because we got to deal with raw materials, parts and components and sub-assemblies and all those things, then final assembly. Final assembly is, it's a dollar and cents thing, right? It's X number of volume, and as I said earlier, example, all the police interceptors that we make for the world come out of the south side of Chicago. So if there's tariffs on the other side, we know what that's going to be. Where it gets difficult is in that raw materials and the parts and components and those things, because if you look at the laws and what they're doing and the tariffs, it has to be transformational before it has a tariff. So what does that mean? Because we can have pieces and parts and components and they can go back and forth across the Canadian border or the Mexican border several different times, numerous different times. And the question is, what's transformational, what's not? That's been the benefit of the USMCA and its form up to now, and we'll figure out what it is going forward. But all that does make decisions on where you're going to make things and how you make things and where those places are at. So it'll be, the next 30 days, trust me, we've got teams of people, internal and external, that are doing everything they can to figure out exactly where this is all going to land.
All right, and now we have some mood lighting. Dark times. So just following up on that, Tony, how is Ford kind of approaching these changing times? Like, how is your organization responding to it in order to stay competitive? Obviously, we've seen some of the activity of the automakers making direct contact with the White House, but is there any additional strategies that you and your colleagues are putting in place just to stay competitive in
Well,
this ever-evolving environment?
Obviously, I won't say exactly what because it's competitive, but we did a lot of things.
Tell us your
we did a
secrets.
lot of things before this moment, anticipating this moment. So we put some provisions and things in places to help us weather at least the near term, right, in terms of where product and parts and everything ended up and, doing things. So we got a little bit of that, and all the OEMs, I think, probably did something similar. But after that, it's really about trying to make sure we understand it and make sure we know how to navigate it. And yes, the 3 historic U.S.-based OEMs did have conversations this week with the president, and we'll continue to do that and work with the administration and see where we can take all this and see what is, the safe landing place that hopefully is a win-win for all of us.
I think that's an important point. It's maintaining an open channel of communication, no matter who's in office, no matter whether it's at a local level, a state level, federal level. You're maintaining channels of communication and allowing for additional opportunities to just better understand what's happening. That's a really important component. Now, just on that piece, a follow-up to that would be on collaboration. So I'll kick it over to Jacob and Charles. What role does collaboration and partnerships play in responding to these challenges and driving innovation? Jacob, let's start with you.
Well, when you say that challenges, the ones I'm thinking about are especially related to COVID. I'm mostly in the electronic space, or I'm exclusively there. So I'm thinking about chip shortages, board shortages. And there's a lot of, when the lead time goes out to 52 weeks on a product, you have to collaborate across the entire value chain. So from design to manufacture to procurement, you have to see what is available, what can we work in, how quickly can we work it in, how do we do QA on it to make sure that when you put it in, it gets out the door again. So making these types of changes isn't necessarily new. I think electronics have dealt with this probably forever, and certainly you ship products, they don't work as expected, there's a field failure, you have to go back and fix it. That's been kind of, I assume, almost since the day one of electronics. But when you saw it happen so quickly, and since there was such an emphasis on just-in-time manufacturing and not carrying excess inventory, everyone was operating on such lean margins, and there was very little resilience. And so it just exacerbated every single failure or stress point just blew up. And so it was all hands on deck. Anyone that has anything to do with developing, testing, building, shipping that product, everyone, marketing the product, everyone had to be involved, because you all of a sudden had to take some kind of cheaper, worse circuit, put it in, and get marketing to tell someone that it was better for them for some reason. Those things were happening with regularity.
And Charlie, what are your thoughts on
So that trickled right on down to the defense industry. And so now you go from 90-day lead times to 9-month lead times. And so all of a sudden you start to see, well, wait a minute, the manufacturing capacity of the U.S. starts to become its own strategic significance in a way that wasn't necessarily, I think, thought of in the general psyche in Washington, D.C. at the time. But now if you look at the number of startups that are getting into the defense space, the number of manufacturers that are trying to get into the defense space that weren't 10 years ago, that's a significant change. So the conversations that I'm able to have now with the S&T folks that I work with has gone from kind of an avoidance of it to a little bit more of an embracing, because we started to really see, especially with the board manufacturing, which we'll talk later, but that really put a hindrance on our ability to deliver some critical capabilities out to the warfighting community. So this idea of the strategic significance of manufacturing in the U.S. as a part of our national defense strategy is something I think really got highlighted during the COVID era.
And just sticking with that, and if we transition just slightly to AI, quantum computing, advanced technologies, obviously that's something that the Defense Department has taken a very keen interest in. Here in Illinois, we've started the Illinois Quantum and Microelectronics Park on the south side of Chicago. And we will also have our National Quantum Algorithm Center, which is first of its kind in the nation. We have 2 key companies that are going to be there. We have PsiQuantum, and we also have IBM, who's going to be an anchor tenant of our National Quantum Algorithm Center. But in addition to that, we have DARPA, who's announced an over $140 million investment for quantum technologies at the IQMP. So it's a huge, huge investment by the federal government, and it's showing certainly a keen interest in advanced computing technologies, and that being a key part of the strategy for DoD. Now, on that front, an adjacent kind of industry is AI. And how does your organization, Charlie, believe that AI will shape manufacturing?
Kind of two parts to it. I think AI will shape manufacturing in terms of how we start to define the relationships between the different companies and how quickly they can collaborate and move forward together. Should break down some of the barriers, some of the things that occur that allow us to not communicate quickly. The other piece, though, is I think the AI itself may unlock more manufacturing potential than we have available. And I'm kind of curious for the folks that are closer to that, but as we've looked at a project I'm working on to kind of characterize the greater ecosystem for the DoD, the ability to use AI to take older machines or existing capability and start to get new results from it or faster results from it or use it as a latent thing that was not able to be used before is, I think, where if you're a traditional manufacturer and you're running a machine shop, you need to actually start to think about embracing what that technology could do for your existing equipment, right? And there's going to be innovation in that space.
Mark, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, right in line with what Charlie was saying. I think like being able to, even in the whole value chain that Jacob was referring to earlier, like being able to reduce scrap or waste by leveraging an AI tool, for example, to help in product design and looking at products or leveraging modern technology like image recognition on an assembly line and being able to detect the defect early and fix it in process so that you don't have waste at the tail end or manual hands having to fix something or completely scrapping the product altogether. And so AI is making a lot of that decision-making process quicker, so you can make decisions while the product is being made as opposed to after the fact or quality happening on the tail end of a manufacturing process. So it's driving a lot of manufacturers to modernize now. So the concept of Industry 4.0 has been around for a really long time, but people have been struggling to find out, especially if you're in the mid-market, if it was really worth the investment to do that. And now with the costs coming down for some of these technologies being more accessible to folks, we're seeing much bigger demand in this mid-market or smaller manufacturers starting to adopt some of these technologies to help improve like quality or product design and things of that nature.
And as a follow-up to that, what is your approach to adopting automation, robotics, and security?
Yeah, security again was mentioned as a huge factor. As you have shop floors that have been around for a long time, then security was never even a concern, but making sure that it's treated as a first-class citizen as your traditional IT organization, I think we're seeing that shift. So organizations taking that light, regulations also helping that too, especially because a lot of this you see in utilities where they're extremely heavily regulated and have a lot of operational technology in the field that need to be secured the same way. So security is definitely a huge factor, but how we're seeing it being adopted is really identifying use cases that are going to bring value to the organization, starting small, and then building them up from there and scaling from there. So not necessarily putting AI or something like that in for the sake of AI because someone said you need to use AI, which is happening because about 60% of manufacturers are using AI today in some fashion, but making sure that you're taking a value-based approach to it and understanding how do you bring it together from the entire value chain and then where to kind of source the data to make that happen. And I think that's the big change.
That's really interesting. 60% of manufacturers are using AI.
Yeah, in some form or fashion, yeah.
Wow. Jacob, to you, how can AI be leveraged to help manufacturers be nimbler in a constantly changing global economy?
Yeah, we were actually talking about digital twins last night, and I think I'd rather call them, at least from my perspective, digital siblings at this point. You know, they're pretty close and they really help, and it's similar DNA, but you can't really simulate everything. But when you can get a digital twin of a physical product, or if that's what I think about the product level, but maybe you think about the entire assembly line level digital twin. But when you can really capture in simulation with real physics models behind it, with all of the right variables, what can happen, what went wrong, what will go wrong, and what will happen if we make a change over here, it is extremely powerful. And so the more you can, and what we're noticing at NuCurrent is that the more AI is getting lifted up, the more available there is open source machine learning tools, just being able to use very basic AI type tools like Bayesian optimization, and you can use that against physics models that exist, and you're starting to be able to put all these things together, and it's making things like digital twins become much more of a reality and less of a sci-fi thing, and that really makes supply chains and manufacturing much more flexible so that you can move when you need to. You don't have to make these like long-term intensive capital bets. You can kind of be flexible along the way because you can anticipate digitally what's going to happen.
What would you say are some of the, like recognizing kind of all of the advantages that you laid out, Jacob, what would you say are some of the most significant disruptions that are currently shaping the manufacturing landscape?
I'm going to pass on that for a second. If anyone else has it better, give me a second to think about that one. I can come back to me.
Okay. Well, you mentioned something else. You started talking through kind of like the future and what some of the trends that we're seeing. What would you say are the trends 3 to 5 years from now that you could anticipate? No? Okay.
No, it's okay. I'm just thinking. I'm thinking about like actual examples. Again, I'm not a manufacturer, so I'm trying to think about like what our very sophisticated customers do. I mean, one trend that started not that recently, but it was ironic listening earlier about Mexico tariffs being the thing, the topic du jour. We had a company that was building in China, and they said, "Hey, we're really nervous about Chinese tariffs. We're going to start manufacturing in Mexico." And they put up a line about 1.5 years ago in Mexico, and that can't feel very good right now. And so I'm thinking about these long-term bets that companies have to make, and I just have to imagine the smartest ones that we see, they're not concentrating their bets as heavily geographically, technologically. I think they're thinking about it more modularly. You know, what can I get done, and how can I mix and match it just in case uncertainty happens? As was said earlier, uncertainty is the only certainty, right? That's all we know, and it's even crazier right now than I feel like it's been in a long time. So I guess that would be a continued trend. How do you become more flexible, more modular, so that you don't have to make these large bets and just hope that the uncertainty doesn't come knocking on your door?
Tony?
I agree with everything was said, first and foremost, about the manufacturing process. Obviously, for us, anything that helps us to be more efficient, improves quality, improves the value-based proposition, right, is important, because when you're producing the number of products that we're producing, if there is a quality issue in the system, it manifests itself pretty fast, right? So anything that helps us to do that. But for us, in addition to just the manufacturing process, the vehicle content is another big one, right? As we're moving towards more and more connectivity, autonomous vehicles, AI is a big part of those conversations as well, because let's be honest, the changes in the content of the vehicles in the last less than a decade is moving fast, right? It's the biggest, most uncharted territory in terms of laptops and all the other technology you've seen, but at the same time, it's got to help us with security and privacy and those type of things. Because so it's complicated, but for us, it's not just manufacturing process where AI is helpful. It's also content in the vehicles.
Mark, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think one thing maybe too is just as a disruption is really labor. I think the shift in technology has kind of stepped up the labor game a little bit, and so you need to have some skilled workers that can operate some of this. Like I think there's this I don't know, a fear of robots are going to take all the jobs, but in the reality of it is there aren't enough laborers to help in this manufacturing space, and I think it's just going to allow people to do more with less, and you need people that understand how to operate these more advanced technologies and work alongside them, and so I think upskilling the labor force is going to be important as something that's happening, and we're finding that a lot of our clients are just having a tough time finding workers in general in the manufacturing and distribution space, and so there's a shortage of workers, and I think that's affecting and causing a lot of investment in automation right now, both in the robotics and data space or in AI space, to be able to really do more with less in your shop and your warehouses.
What can states like Illinois do to help with that particular problem on the labor front? Certainly workforce is probably one of the key assets of our state. We talk about, having a workforce of 6 million strong, half of which have at least a bachelor's degree or higher, the third largest community college system, an incredible set of universities and institutions of higher education. We have over 240 institutions of higher education here. So what should the state consider, or what should states like Illinois consider when dealing with some of these challenges and making sure that we are keeping pace with the innovation that's happening in the manufacturing sector?
Yeah, honestly, I think working with local manufacturers and distributors on just understanding what skill sets or the gaps exist today and offering some sort of form of education or path to that. I don't think it's a heavy educational lift, but it's one that needs to exist. And understanding where the employment gaps are, because I'm seeing them locally at a lot of the clients we work with in Illinois, Wisconsin, Iowa, Indiana. So.
Let's talk afterward.
All right.
Because we got some programs.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Tony.
Yeah, but things like daily college, daily university, huge, right? To have that kind of asset sitting there. But anything we can do to get into the high schools and make sure that they understand there are careers to be had in manufacturing that are, I think some of the things that we're doing in particular, when you look at the vehicle content and everything, are a lot more exciting than maybe historically. But I think there's always been this mentality, right? We all want our kids to be doctors or lawyers or such, right? But there's a lot of hands-on, great applications, a lot of technology. There's a lot of things going on now that are way beyond just assembling a vehicle or a part or a widget or whatever. Just helping to get that out there, that what these career paths are, experiential learning in high school experiences that they can get to see this. Anything we can do in that space so that they can kind of understand what their options are. Because let's be honest, the U.S. is a little bit different than most other developed nations in that you go in education, you get to a place, you take a test, and they say you're going this way, and you're going here, and you can take a test, you're going that way. In the U.S., we get to make our own choices all the way, which is I firmly believe in. But we don't do a great job of educating what those opportunities are out there, in my opinion.
Charlie, anything you want to add?
Totally. Absolutely. The education is probably the most important piece as we sit and look down and go, giving people the opportunity, but not just giving them the opportunity, but the idea that you kind of force them through the system a little bit longer than they might not want to be there to see where they could go. Because they're not going to get that right away. And that's, obviously I'm a dad, so I'm dealing with that on a daily basis. But it's the thing that's going to drive you forward. And that kind of leads to what am I sitting here? It's what would I love to see? I would love to see every super secret program I've worked on get outpaced by innovators at mHUB that just graduated high school, right? That would be awesome. Because what that means is now we've taken something and made it a commodity, which becomes game-changing for the United States, right? And so that's kind of why we're driving, it's why I'm here. And so that education is what's going to get us there. And I'm going to get off the stage on that.
Haven, is that a challenge accepted? Very good. All right. Well, I know we only have a few minutes left, and we've had just a fantastic time listening to this panel. Just a few more questions in these last couple of minutes. Guys, what message or advice would you give to manufacturing executives seeking to future-proof their organizations? What's your one piece of advice? Go for it. Yeah.
I think data is king. If you can't measure everything you're doing, then you're doing something wrong. You got to understand all aspects of the entire, it was mentioned on the value chain, but from a product design, product development, manufacturing, creation, sales, make sure you're collecting your data and running analytics on it. Like if you're starting from scratch, build that into your business plan from day one that you're going to do that, because if you can't measure it, then it's lost, and you're just wasting time. So.
Tony?
And I would agree with that, but I would add, then on the next level, that is innovation. If you're not innovating, you're dying, right?
Charlie?
I had two.
Oh, Jacob, go ahead.
My two.
Oh, those were your two.
So this was the only thing I would have said differently about the data one.
Just glad I got out before he did.
I was like, all right, I'm going to get the innovation one then. All right. So on the data one, it's, we are all in our personal lives even experiencing the power of AI, and it's really only just begun, but it's really only as good as what you can put into it. And so it doesn't even need to be complex, structured data. I don't think in the future, a few years from now, AI can handle loosely structured, non-structured data. So all this investment into like database management and stuff that's been going on for the last couple decades, I don't think that's the important thing. I think it's keeping it. Even if it's in boxes and then you just start scanning it in and getting it somewhere into the digital world, I think that's, so I totally agree with data, and then innovation raises all boats from every direction. It creates demand for smarter manufacturing, better manufacturing, more jobs. So those are my two as well.
And Charlie, round us out.
I'd round it out with security. So making sure that you've got a good part of your strategy that looks at what is that I need to secure inside, especially in my data, but not for the fear of holding it so tight that you can't share it in order to grow, right? So there's a balance there. But I think security is going to have more of a value, especially as we move into a more AI/ML-based ecosystem.
And then one last question in our 1 minute and 15 seconds that we have left. What should states do to ensure the growth of this sector?
Invest in innovation.
In education, to drive down the idea of careers and the technology and all the things that are part of this. Because, look, without the future workforce, it's just going to get tougher and tougher.
Yep.
Yeah, education for me, I think, is the big one.
Yep. All right.
Education.
Education, innovation, workforce, security, data. That's the
We've hit all the buzzwords.
hit all the buzzwords. There we go. Well, thank you all. AI, yes. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate your time. And let's give it up for our esteemed panelists.